You think you know the person you share a bed with until the mask finally slips. Dakota looked at his wife in her faded thrift store dress and laughed, calling her a pitiful anchor, dragging down his ambitions. He left her standing in the driveway, eager to impress the corporate elite. But he never expected that just hours later, a convoy of phantom Rolls-Royces would arrive to deliver the ultimate karmic retribution. The morning sun filtered through the cheap blinds of their suburban home, casting harsh, unforgiving lines across the kitchen linoleum. Evelyn stood by the counter, quietly stirring a cup of instant coffee. She wore a simple, oversized beige cardigan and a pair of worn-out denim jeans. Her hair, a rich chestnut that used to cascade in vibrant waves, was tied back in a messy, practical bun. She looked every bit the part she had chosen to play for the last 5 years, the unassuming, quiet, and deeply supportive housewife. Across the kitchen island stood Dakota. He was a man meticulously constructed for the corporate ladder, smelling heavily of expensive bergamot cologne and sheer unadulterated ambition. He was adjusting the Windsor knot of a silk tie that cost more than their monthly grocery budget. Dakota worked as a senior director at Meridian Capital, a ruthless wealth management firm, where image was not just everything. It was the only thing. "Evelyn, did you pick up my suit from the dry cleaners?" Dakota asked, not bothering to look up from the reflection in the microwave door. His tone wasn't a request. It was an expectation, laced with the subtle condescension he had perfected over the years. "Yes, Dakota," she replied softly, placing a plate of scrambled eggs and toast on the marble counter. "It's hanging in your closet, the charcoal one just like you asked." Dakota finally turned his eyes, sweeping over her, with a mixture of pity and barely concealed disdain. It was the look of a man who believed he had outgrown his surroundings. "Good, because tomorrow night is the Meridian Winter Gala. The partners are going to be there, the board of directors. Even the shadowy private equity overlords who own the firm might send a representative. It is the most important night of my career." Evelyn offered a warm, genuine smile. She remembered a time when Dakota's ambition was charming a fiery drive to build a life together. "I know how much this means to you. I've already laid out my navy dress. I managed to sew the hem where it frayed last month, and with the right shoes, it'll look perfectly elegant." Dakota froze. The fork halfway to his mouth slowly lowered back to the plate. The silence in the kitchen stretched thick and suffocating. "Your navy dress," Dakota repeated, his voice dropping an octave, slipping into a chillingly calm register. "The one you bought off the clearance rack at a department store 3 years ago." "It's a classic silhouette, Dakota," Evelyn said, feeling a familiar defensive knot tighten in her stomach. "Nobody will know the difference. Besides, we agreed we needed to save money this month. The mortgage on this house is—" "Stop, Dakota," snapped, slamming his hand flat against the island. The coffee cups rattled. "Just stop. You don't get it, Evelyn. You have absolutely no concept of how the real world works. This isn't one of your little book club meetings. This is Meridian Capital. The women who attend this gala wear couture. They wear diamonds that cost more than this entire house. They radiate power, sophistication, and class." He stepped closer, looming over her. The scent of his bergamot cologne was suddenly nauseating. "I am on the short list for junior partner. Do you know what that means? It means I am finally breaking into the elite. And I will not have my chances ruined because my wife shows up looking like a pitiful small-town charity case." Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. She was used to his passive-aggressive remarks, his constant critiques of her simple lifestyle, but the raw cruelty in his eyes was new. It was absolute. "Dakota," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from the sudden breaking realization of who he truly was. I am your wife. We took vows. I've supported you since you were an unpaid intern eating instant ramen, and I'm grateful for that, I really am." Dakota sighed, feigning exhaustion, as he pinched the bridge of his nose. "But you haven't grown, Evelyn. You've stagnated. You're comfortable being average. You have zero ambition, zero drive, and zero sense of how to carry yourself in high society. You're just pitiful. You drag me down. Whenever I look at you, I see a woman who has completely given up." He picked up his briefcase, the leather gleaming under the kitchen lights. "You are not coming to the gala. I've already told the committee I'm bringing a colleague, Quinn Montgomery. She's one of our top clients. She knows the partners, and frankly, she knows how to act like she belongs in a 5-star ballroom. Do us both a favor, Evelyn. Stay home. Order a pizza. Watch your little reality shows. Let me handle the adult world." Without waiting for a response, Dakota turned on his heel and walked out the door. The heavy oak slammed shut, echoing through the empty, silent house. Evelyn stood frozen for a long time. She looked down at her faded jeans, her simple cardigan. A quiet, humorless laugh escaped her lips. If only Dakota knew. If only he had the slightest microscopic clue about the adult world she had walked away from to build a simple life with him. The day passed in a blur of mundane chores, but Evelyn's mind was a tempest. Dakota's words played on an agonizing loop in her head. Pitiful, small-town charity case. A weight dragging him down. She walked into their master bedroom to gather the laundry. As she picked up the trousers Dakota had worn the day before, a crumpled piece of thick, textured paper fell from the pocket. Evelyn bent down and picked it up. It was a receipt from Garrick & Company, the most exclusive high-end jeweler in the city. Evelyn's breath hitched as she read the itemized list. 1 platinum pendant necklace. Marquise-cut diamonds, 3.5 carats. Price $42,000. The date on the receipt was 2 days ago. Dakota had claimed he was working late on a quarterly report. Instead, he had been buying a small fortune in diamonds, and Evelyn knew with absolute soul-crushing certainty that the necklace was not for her. Dakota complained about the water bill being $20 too high. He wouldn't spend $40,000 on a wife he considered a pitiful charity case. The name he had dropped that morning echoed in her mind. Quinn Montgomery. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, the receipt trembling in her hand. For 5 years, she had played the role of the devoted penny-pinching wife. She had clipped coupons, cooked all his meals, ironed his shirts, and swallowed her pride every time he belittled her lack of a high-paying career. She had done it all because she believed in love. She had believed that stripping away the immense, suffocating privilege of her past would allow her to find a man who loved her for her soul, not her bank account. How spectacularly wrong she had been. Suddenly her cell phone buzzed on the nightstand. The caller ID displayed an international #1 she hadn't seen in over half a decade. Most people would have ignored it, assuming it was spam. But Evelyn knew exactly who it was. She swiped the screen and brought the phone to her ear. "Hello, Archibald." "Miss Sinclair," an older, deeply resonant British voice replied. The formalities immediately sent a shiver down Evelyn's spine. No one had called her that in 5 years. To the world, she was Evelyn Hayes, an orphan with a modest background. "It is profoundly good to hear your voice, my dear, though I wish the circumstances of my calling were more joyous." "What's happened, Archie?" Evelyn asked, her posture straightening instinctively. The meek, supportive housewife vanished in a heartbeat, replaced by the sharp, analytical mind she had inherited from a bloodline of titans. "It is your grandfather, Evelyn. Nathaniel Sinclair passed away peacefully in his sleep early this morning at the estate in Geneva," the lawyer said gently. Evelyn closed her eyes. A complex wave of grief and relief washed over her. Nathaniel Sinclair was a billionaire magnate, a man who ruled the global shipping real estate and private equity markets with an iron fist. He was also a controlling, demanding patriarch who had tried to map out every second of Evelyn's life, from her education to her eventual arranged marriage. She had fled his empire in the middle of the night, abandoning her trust funds, her titles, and her immense inheritance, just to breathe freely, to live normally, to marry Dakota. I see," Evelyn whispered. "I'm sorry to hear that, Archibald. But you know I walked away. I signed the severance documents. I wanted no part of the Sinclair conglomerate." "I am aware of what you signed, Miss Sinclair," Archibald replied, his tone shifting into strict professionalism. "However, your grandfather was a stubborn man, and he was entirely dissatisfied with your cousin's abilities to manage the empire. He secretly voided your severance from the primary trust 3 years ago." Evelyn stood up, dropping the jeweler's receipt onto the floor. "He did what Nathaniel amended his last will and testament, Evelyn. As of this morning, upon his death, you are the sole inheritor of the Sinclair family's controlling shares. You are the majority shareholder of the Vanguard Group, the prime real estate holdings in Manhattan and London, and of course the entirety of the Sinclair private equity portfolio." Evelyn's mind raced. The sheer magnitude of the wealth was staggering billions upon billions of dollars. But it wasn't the money that made her heart pound against her ribs. It was a sudden, sharp realization. "Archibald," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Sinclair Private Equity. Tell me about their recent acquisitions. Did grandfather finalize the buyout of the American wealth management firms?" "Indeed he did, just last quarter." Archibald confirmed, rustling papers on the other end of the line. "We acquired a controlling 85% stake in 3 major firms on the East Coast, the largest being a firm called Meridian Capital." Evelyn stopped breathing. The silence stretched across the transatlantic line. "Meridian Capital," she repeated, tasting the words. Her husband's firm, the firm he worshipped, the firm whose partners he kissed the ground for, the firm hosting the gala tomorrow night to impress their shadowy private equity overlords. She owned it. She owned the partners. She owned Dakota's career. "Archibald," Evelyn said, and for the first time in 5 years, the fierce, unyielding confidence of a Sinclair heiress roared back to life in her chest. "I need you to arrange a flight to my location, immediately. Bring the legal team. Bring the transfer documents. And Archie." "Yes, Miss Sinclair." "I am going to need a wardrobe fitting. I have a gala to attend tomorrow night." The next 24 hours were a whirlwind of orchestrated chaos, the kind that only limitless wealth could conjure. Evelyn checked into the penthouse suite of the Grand Plaza Hotel downtown, leaving behind the suburban house, the cheap coffee, and the illusion of Evelyn Hayes. By noon, the day of the gala, the penthouse was transformed into a fortress of high finance and high fashion. Archibald Reynolds, a distinguished man in a bespoke Savile Row suit, sat across from Evelyn at a mahogany dining table covered in leather-bound folios. Beside him were 3 junior attorneys, hanging on Evelyn's every word. "Sign here, Miss Sinclair, and here. This legally binds your assumption of the chairman's seat for the overarching holding company." Archibald instructed, pointing with a gold Mont Blanc pen. Evelyn signed her name with fluid, practiced strokes. As she pushed the final document across the table, she felt an immense weight settle onto her shoulders, but it was a weight she was built to carry. "Excellent," Archibald smiled, closing the folio. The board of Meridian Capital has been notified that the new majority shareholder will be attending their anniversary gala tonight. They are in an absolute panic, eager to impress you. They have no idea who you are, only that you are a Sinclair. Let's keep it that way until I walk through the doors. Evelyn said, her eyes flashing with a cold, determined light. She thought of Dakota. She thought of the $42,000 diamond necklace draped around Quinn Montgomery's neck. She thought of being called a pitiful charity case. Now. Evelyn stood up, turning to the massive floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Is the transportation arranged? Of course, Miss Sinclair. Archibald nodded. A fleet of 6 phantom Rolls-Royces jet black, as is the Sinclair tradition. The lead car is heavily armored and features the family crest. You will have a full security detail of 12 former Special Forces operatives. They are currently downstairs clearing the route. Evelyn turned away from the window and walked toward the master bedroom. Waiting for her was a team of Europe's finest stylists, flown in privately at dawn. Suspended on a velvet mannequin in the center of the room was the dress. It was a masterpiece of haute couture, custom designed in Paris, and pulled from the Sinclair family's private fashion vault. It was a deep midnight sapphire silk that moved like liquid water embroidered with subtle crushed diamond dust that caught the light with every breath she took. It was a dress designed not just to be seen, but to demand absolute submission. For 2 hours the stylists worked. They washed away the tired, subdued housewife. They restored the brilliant, wealthy luster to her hair, sweeping it up into an elegant, commanding updo that exposed her long neck. Her makeup was sharp, sophisticated, and utterly lethal blood-red lips and striking smoky eyes that radiated power. Finally, Archibald knocked on the open door, stepping in with a heavy velvet box. "Your grandfather wanted you to have this when you finally returned," Archibald said softly, opening the box. Evelyn gasped. Resting on a bed of black satin was the Sinclair star, a priceless, flawless 45-carat blue diamond necklace surrounded by a constellation of smaller, brilliant-cut white diamonds. It made the $42,000 necklace Dakota bought look like something pulled from a plastic gumball machine. Archibald gently fastened the heavy icy diamonds around her neck. Evelyn looked at herself in the full-length antique mirror. The woman looking back wasn't Evelyn Hayes, the pitiful, penny-pinching wife who hemmed her own thrift store dresses. This was Evelyn Sinclair, the billionaire heiress, the owner of Meridian Capital. "It is time, Miss Sinclair," Archibald said, checking his pocket watch. "The gala has commenced. The CEO of Meridian and his senior staff are waiting in the grand lobby to receive you." "Good," Evelyn said, her voice smooth as velvet and cold as ice. She picked up a sleek, diamond-encrusted clutch. "Let's go see if my husband is enjoying his evening." Down in the subterranean parking garage of the Grand Plaza, the engines of 6 massive Rolls-Royce Phantoms purred in unison, echoing like the growl of a waking dragon. The lead driver, a mountain of a man in a sharp black suit and earpiece, opened the suicide doors of the central Phantom. Evelyn slid into the buttery hand-stitched leather interior. The cabin smelled of rich cedar and untouched wealth. As the convoy rolled out of the garage and onto the neon-lit streets of the city, traffic seemed to instinctively part for them. The sheer, intimidating presence of the identical monstrous luxury vehicles demanded right-of-way. Inside the cavernous ballroom of the St. Regis Dakota Kensington was in his element. He held a glass of vintage champagne, laughing loudly at a terrible joke made by the managing partner of the firm. Attached to Dakota's arm, glowing with smug satisfaction, was Quinn Montgomery. Quinn was wearing a striking crimson dress, and resting beautifully against her collarbone was the $42,000 Marquise-cut diamond pendant. "I have to say, Dakota, you've outdone yourself this quarter." The managing partner chuckled, raising his glass. "And Quinn, lovely to see you as always. You two make quite the power couple. I was wondering when you'd drop the dead weight." Dakota offered a modest, self-deprecating smile, though his eyes gleamed with triumph. "Well, you know how it is, sir. Some people are built for the climb, and some people are just anchors. You have to cut the line eventually if you want to reach the summit." Quinn giggled, trailing a manicured finger down Dakota's lapel. Dakota is ruthless. It's what makes him so magnificent at his job. Suddenly, the ambient string quartet music playing in the ballroom faded. The heavy ornate double doors at the entrance of the ballroom were thrown open by 4 massive security guards in identical black suits. The low murmur of the wealthy crowd instantly died down, replaced by a tense, palpable hush. The CEO of Meridian Capital, a man who usually commanded a room with absolute authority, visibly paled. He practically ran toward the entrance, straightening his bow tie with trembling fingers, flanked by the senior board members. "Ladies and gentlemen," the CEO's voice echoed through the microphone on the main stage, shaking slightly. "Please direct your attention to the entrance. It is my absolute, profound honor to introduce the new majority shareholder of our parent company, the Sinclair conglomerate. Please welcome our new owner, Miss Evelyn Sinclair." Dakota frowned, swirling his champagne. "Sinclair, I thought the old man ran the conglomerate. Who the hell is Evelyn Sinclair?" He turned his head toward the entrance, a polite, sycophantic smile plastered on his face, ready to greet his new billionaire overlord. And then Dakota Kensington stopped breathing. The crystal flute of vintage Dom Perignon slipped from Dakota's suddenly nerveless fingers. It hit the polished marble floor of the St. Regis ballroom with a sharp, violent crash, shattering into 100 glittering pieces. In a room where a dropped pin would have echoed the sound of the breaking glass, was like a gunshot. Heads snapped toward him, annoyed at the breach of etiquette, but Dakota didn't notice. He couldn't hear the murmurs of disapproval. He couldn't feel the champagne soaking into the cuffs of his bespoke Italian trousers. The entirety of his universe had suddenly violently collapsed into a singular, impossible point of focus at the ballroom entrance. Standing there, framed by the towering mahogany doors and flanked by 4 men who looked like they killed for a living, was his wife, Evelyn, the woman he had left in a faded beige cardigan, stirring cheap instant coffee. The woman he had called a pitiful charity case. Except the creature standing in the doorway was not the meek, accommodating housewife he had bullied for half a decade. She looked like a reigning monarch stepping onto a battlefield. The midnight sapphire silk of her dress clung to her like liquid shadow, the crushed diamond dust woven into the fabric, catching the light of the immense crystal chandeliers. But it was the necklace that truly stole the oxygen from the room. The Sinclair star rested against her collarbone, a 45-carat blue diamond surrounded by a halo of blinding white gems. It was a piece of jewelry so famously exquisite that Dakota recognized it from a Forbes article he had read years ago about the world's most guarded private vaults. "Dakota, what on earth is wrong with you?" Quinn hissed, stepping away to save the hem of her crimson dress from the spilled champagne. She looked at his pale, sweat-slicked face, then followed his gaze to the entrance. "Good Lord, who is that? That—" Dakota whispered, his vocal cords paralyzed his mind, frantically misfiring. That's my—" He couldn't say it. The reality was too absurd, too terrifying to give voice to. Winston Carmichael, the silver-haired, fiercely intimidating CEO of Meridian Capital. A man who had routinely made Dakota tremble during quarterly reviews, was practically jogging toward Evelyn. Winston stopped 3 feet away, executing a deep deferential bow that bordered on groveling. "Miss Sinclair." Winston's voice boomed, though it carried a distinct nervous tremor. "On behalf of the entire board of Meridian Capital, it is an absolute honor to welcome you. We were entirely unaware that the new chairman of the holding company would grace us with her presence tonight." Evelyn didn't smile. She didn't offer her hand. She merely looked at Winston with a cool, calculating gaze that made the older executive shift uncomfortably. "Mr. Carmichael," Evelyn said, her voice amplified by the sheer acoustics of the hushed room, was smooth, commanding, and stripped of any warmth. "I was passing through the city to finalize the acquisition documents. I decided it was prudent to inspect the merchandise I just purchased. Lead the way." Of course. Right this way, Miss Sinclair," Winston stammered frantically, gesturing toward the main stage. As Evelyn walked through the crowd, the sea of the city's elite parted for her, like the Red Sea. Billionaires, hedge fund managers, and socialites pressed themselves against the banquet tables, murmuring in hushed, awestruck tones. Evelyn's posture was flawless, her chin held high, her eyes fixed forward. She glided past Dakota and Quinn without so much as a millimeter of a glance in their direction. Dakota felt a cold sweat break out across his back. His heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "She didn't see me," he thought, a desperate, pathetic flare of hope igniting in his chest. Or maybe she's playing a part. Maybe she inherited this yesterday, and she's just as overwhelmed as I am. Yes, that's it. She's my wife. What is mine is hers. I'm rich. I'm a billionaire's husband. Delusion was a powerful narcotic, and Dakota took a massive, desperate dose of it as he watched his wife ascend the grand stage. Winston Carmichael stepped to the microphone, tapping it nervously. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is an unprecedented privilege to introduce the sole heir to the Sinclair conglomerate and our new majority owner, Miss Evelyn Sinclair." Polite, eager applause thundered through the room as Evelyn stepped up to the podium. She rested her hands lightly on the edges of the mahogany stand, letting the silence stretch until the applause died completely. She surveyed the room, her gaze sweeping over the hundreds of terrified, wealthy faces. Finally, her eyes locked dead center on Dakota. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. "Good evening," Evelyn began, her voice ringing out with terrifying clarity. "Meridian Capital has long prided itself on being the pinnacle of wealth management. You manage billions in assets. You command prestige. However, upon reviewing the internal audits yesterday afternoon, I found your corporate culture to be severely lacking." A nervous murmur rippled through the crowd. Winston Carmichael swallowed hard, gripping his own hands behind his back. "The Sinclair conglomerate did not build its empire by tolerating dead weight." Evelyn continued the words, echoing with razor-sharp precision. The phrase hit Dakota like a physical blow to the stomach. Dead weight. Those were his exact words to the managing partner not 10 minutes ago. "We do not tolerate arrogance masking incompetence," she said, her eyes never leaving Dakota's pale face. "And we certainly do not tolerate those who use deceit and betrayal to climb the ladder. Meridian Capital is about to undergo a massive, aggressive restructuring. The era of unchecked privilege at this firm is over. I look forward to personally excising the rot from this company starting tonight. Thank you." Evelyn stepped away from the podium. The applause that followed was frantic, terrified, and utterly desperate. Every executive in the room was suddenly wondering if their job was on the chopping block. But Dakota knew. He knew exactly who the rot was. As Evelyn descended the stage, she was immediately swarmed by a sycophantic cloud of board members and VIPs. They held out business cards like offerings to a deity desperate to make an impression on the woman who now held their financial lives in her hands. Archibald Reynolds, having quietly entered the ballroom through a side door, stepped smoothly to Evelyn's side, flanked by the massive security detail. They created a seamless, impenetrable bubble around her, allowing only the highest-ranking executives to approach for brief, groveling introductions. Across the room, Dakota was hyperventilating. His mind was a frantic, terrifying loop of denial and panic. "Dakota, what is happening?" Quinn demanded, grabbing his arm. Her manicured nails dug into his bicep. "Why was she looking at you like that? Do you know her?" I have to talk to her," Dakota stammered, pulling his arm away from Quinn's grasp. "I can fix this. She's my wife. We're married. I can explain everything." Quinn's jaw dropped, all the color draining from her face. "Your wife? Are you out of your mind? You told me your wife was a nobody, a small-town loser." "She was," Dakota hissed defensively, his pristine facade completely crumbling. He shoved past Quinn, ignoring her outraged gasp, and began pushing his way through the dense crowd of high society elites. "Excuse me, move, get out of the way." He shoved a prominent tech CEO aside, his eyes locked on Evelyn's sapphire dress. He finally breached the inner circle of the crowd, bursting into the clearing where Evelyn stood, conversing coldly with Winston Carmichael. "Evelyn!" Dakota shouted, his voice cracking with a mixture of desperation and false authority. "Evie, honey." Immediately, two of the towering security guards stepped forward, their massive frames forming a wall of solid muscle and Kevlar. The lead guard, a man whose resting expression was a threat of violence, planted a massive hand firmly against Dakota's chest, stopping his forward momentum cold. "Step back, sir." The guard ordered, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "Get your hands off me." Dakota sneered, reverting to his corporate arrogance. "Do you know who I am? I'm her husband. Tell them, Evelyn. Tell these goons to back off." The entire VIP circle fell completely, terrifyingly silent. Winston Carmichael looked between Dakota and Evelyn, his eyes wide with horror as he realized the catastrophic drama unfolding in his ballroom. Evelyn slowly turned. She looked at Dakota, pinned against the security guard's hand, his charcoal suit slightly rumpled, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked small, pitiful. Evelyn raised a single, elegantly manicured finger. The guard instantly dropped his hand and stepped aside, though he remained coiled like a spring ready to strike. "Dakota," Evelyn said quietly. The affection she once held for that name was completely gone, replaced by the sterile tone one might use to address a stranger on a subway. "You decided to attend the gala after all. I thought you had adult matters to attend to." "Evie, Dakota swallowed hard, desperately, trying to force a charming smile. He smoothed his tie. "I didn't know. Why didn't you tell me? My God, Evelyn, the Sinclair Empire. We're billionaires. This changes everything. We can—" "There is no we, Dakota," Evelyn interrupted, her voice slicing through his pathetic rambling like a scalpel. "There hasn't been a we in a very long time. Not since you decided I was an anchor dragging down your pathetic microscopic ambitions." Dakota flushed violently. The surrounding executives were listening with bated breath, witnessing the live execution of a senior director's career and marriage. "Evelyn, please, let's not do this here," Dakota whispered, leaning in, trying to lower his voice to avoid further public humiliation. "You're upset about this morning. I get it. I was stressed about the gala. I said things I didn't mean. Let's go up to a suite. We can talk about this privately. As a team." "A team," Evelyn repeated. A cold, chilling smile played at the corners of her blood-red lips. "A team requires trust, Dakota. It requires partnership. It certainly does not require buying $42,000 marquise-cut diamond pendants for your top clients in exchange for their companionship. A collective gasp echoed through the circle of executives. Dakota recoiled as if he had been struck by lightning. His eyes darted wildly, panic seizing his throat. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't— Save it, Evelyn snapped, stepping forward. The sheer gravitational pull of her presence forced Dakota to take a step back. Archibald Reynolds stepped smoothly from the shadows, producing a sleek, leather-bound tablet. He handed it to Evelyn. You see, Dakota, when I assumed control of Meridian Capital. Today I ordered a priority forensic audit of the senior directors, Evelyn said, tapping the screen. And my team found some fascinating anomalies in your portfolio. It seems your salary and your bonuses, while substantial, weren't quite enough to fund your lavish lifestyle and your expensive mistresses. Quinn Montgomery, who had crept to the edge of the crowd to watch the spectacle, suddenly froze. Several heads turned to look at her, their eyes dropping to the glittering $42,000 diamond pendant resting against her collarbone. You've been skimming margins from your client accounts, Dakota. Evelyn continued, her voice ringing clear across the silent ballroom. A few fractions of a percent here, a hidden transaction fee there. Embezzlement, highly illegal, incredibly stupid, and a direct violation of Meridian's charter. Dakota's knees actually buckled slightly. He reached out to grab the edge of a cocktail table to steady himself. Evelyn, you can't. You're my wife. You can't do this to me. You'll destroy me. You destroyed yourself the moment you forgot who you swore a vow to. Evelyn whispered, stepping close enough that he could smell her expensive custom perfume. You are officially terminated from Meridian Capital, effective immediately. Mr. Carmichael Carsetsu. Winston. Carmichael scrambled forward, practically saluting. Yes, Miss Sinclair. Ensure that security escorts Mr. Kensington off the premises, box up his office, and freeze all of his corporate assets, pending a full federal investigation, Evelyn ordered, without looking away from Dakota's terrified, tear-filled eyes. Evie, please, I'm begging you. Dakota openly wept now, the facade of the untouchable corporate titan completely pulverized. He dropped to his knees on the marble floor, grasping at the hem of her midnight sapphire dress. I have nothing. The mortgage, the cars, I can't pay for any of it. Without this job, I'll go to jail. Evelyn calmly reached down and peeled his trembling fingers off her dress, treating him with the exact level of disgust one might reserve for a cockroach. That sounds like a real-world problem, Dakota, Evelyn said coldly. And you explicitly told me you wanted to handle the adult world all by yourself. She turned to Archibald. Archie, serve him the papers. Archibald reached into his tailored jacket and produced a thick, sealed manila envelope. He dropped it unceremoniously onto the marble floor, directly in front of the kneeling, sobbing Dakota. Divorce filings, Mr. Kensington, Archibald said crisply. Along with a comprehensive dossier of your financial crimes, our legal team expects you to sign the uncontested waiver by tomorrow morning. If you attempt to fight this, I assure you the Sinclair Legal Division will ensure you do not see the outside of a federal penitentiary for the next 3 decades. Evelyn didn't wait to see him pick up the envelope. She turned her back on her husband, the man who had mocked her frugality and ridiculed her support, and walked away. The sea of elites parted for her once more, their faces pale, their respect for her absolute and entirely fueled by fear. Behind her, the sound of Dakota's weeping was quickly drowned out by the harsh, uncompromising grip of the security guards hoisting him to his feet to drag him out the back service elevator. The trash was finally being taken out. The night air outside the St. Regis was biting, and unforgiving, matching the sudden sheer drop in Dakota Kensington's life trajectory. The massive double doors of the service entrance banged open, and the two towering security operatives practically threw him onto the wet pavement of the alleyway. Dakota landed hard on his hands and knees, the abrasive asphalt tearing the knees of his $3,000 Italian wool trousers. His palms were scraped and bleeding. He gasped for air, the icy wind slicing through his soaked shirt as the adrenaline of the last hour morphed into a paralyzing, suffocating terror. "Do not attempt to return to the premises, Mr. Kensington." One of the guards stated, his voice devoid of any human empathy. "Your access to all Meridian Capital properties has been permanently revoked." The heavy steel door slammed shut, the sound of the deadbolt sliding into place, echoing like the final nail in a coffin. Dakota remained on his hands and knees in the damp alley, staring blankly at the puddles reflecting the neon city lights. His mind was entirely incapable of processing the magnitude of his destruction. Just 2 hours ago, he was a god in the making. He was the golden boy of wealth management, destined for a corner office and a seat at the table of the elite. Now he was a radioactive, unemployed pariah, facing decades in federal prison. The sound of sharp, angry footsteps clicking against the pavement jolted him from his stupor. He looked up, his eyes wide and desperate to see Quinn Montgomery marching down the alley. She had a thick fur coat draped over her crimson dress, shielding her from the cold. "Quinn!" Dakota choked out, scrambling to his feet. He reached out to her, a drowning man grasping for a lifeline. "Quinn, thank God. Listen, it's a misunderstanding. Evelyn is she's acting out. She's hysterical. I can hire lawyers. We can fight this. I just need you to front me some capital until my accounts are unfrozen." Quinn stopped just out of his reach. She looked at his scraped palms, his ruined suit, and his pathetic, pleading expression. The admiration that had sparkled in her eyes all evening was completely, violently extinguished, replaced by a look of profound, visceral disgust. "Are you completely delusional, Dakota?" Quinn spat her voice, dripping with venom. "Did you not hear a single word that woman said you embezzled from your clients? My accounts are managed by your firm. You skimmed off the top of my money to buy me this." She aggressively unclasped the $42,000 marquise-cut diamond pendant from her neck and threw it at him. The heavy platinum chain hit his chest and clattered onto the wet pavement. "Quinn, please." Dakota begged, tears streaming down his face, his corporate arrogance entirely vaporized. "I did it for us. I wanted to show you. I could provide the lifestyle you deserve. I have nothing left. You're all I have." Quinn let out a harsh, humorless laugh that cut Dakota deeper than the freezing wind. "Provide for me. You're a broke, fraudulent, soon-to-be convict who lied about everything. I don't date charity cases, Dakota, and I certainly don't associate with criminals." She turned on her designer heel, pausing only to look back over her shoulder. "Do not ever contact me again. If you call my phone, my lawyers will file a restraining order before you can even finish the voicemail. Rot in hell, you pathetic loser." Dakota watched her walk away, her silhouette disappearing into the glamorous, glittering city that had just violently ejected him. He slowly sank back to his knees in the alley, his hands hovering over the discarded diamond necklace in the puddle. The silence of the night was broken only by the sound of his own ragged, pathetic sobbing. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in swift, merciless corporate execution. When Dakota finally stumbled back to their suburban home, at dawn, he found the locks had already been changed. Taped to the front door was a glaring legal notice from the Sinclair conglomerate's real estate division, informing him that the property which he horrifyingly realized had always been in Evelyn's name, paid for in cash, he assumed came from her modest savings, was now off limits to him. He retreated to his luxury SUV, intending to sleep in the leather seats, only to find a tow truck hitching it up. The repo men informed him, with a distinct lack of sympathy, that the vehicle was a corporate lease through Meridian Capital, and his privileges had been revoked. Desperate Dakota walked 3 miles to a cheap motel, using the last $50 in his wallet to secure a room that smelled faintly of mold and stale smoke. He tried to log into his offshore accounts, the ones he had carefully hidden from his wife and the IRS. The screen loaded, and a single terrifying word flashed in red text across his banking portal. Account seized. Pending federal investigation. Evelyn hadn't just fired him. She had systematically dismantled his entire existence with the surgical precision of a billionaire who commanded armies of lawyers and forensic accountants. She had stripped away his money, his home, his career, his mistress, and his pride, leaving him completely naked to face the consequences of his actions. By Tuesday morning, Dakota was sitting in the cramped, dingy office of a public defender. He had tried to call every high-powered defense attorney in the city, but the moment they heard the name Sinclair, they hung up. No one with half a brain was going to war against Evelyn's empire. "Look, Mr. Kensington," the public defender, an overworked man with coffee stains on his tie, sighed heavily. He dropped a massive stack of folders onto his desk. "I'm going to be straight with you. The prosecution's case is airtight. Meridian's auditors handed the feds a silver platter. They have wire transfers, forged signatures, and digital footprints linking you to over $3 million in embezzled client funds." Dakota stared blankly at the wall, his face pale and gaunt. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 days. There has to be a loophole, a plea deal, something. "The plea deal is 30 yours, the lawyer said grimly. "If you take this to trial, they'll push for 50. Your wife's legal team has unlimited resources. You have a public defender and a frozen bank account. My advice, sign the uncontested divorce waiver she sent you. If you fight her in civil court, she'll make sure the criminal court buries you under the jail." Dakota looked down at his shaking hands. The words his wife had spoken at the gala echoed in his hollow mind. A team requires trust. It requires partnership. He had laughed at her. He had called her a pitiful anchor, dragging him down. And in his blinding narcissistic arrogance, he had completely failed to see that Evelyn wasn't dragging him down. She was the only thing holding him up. With a trembling hand, Dakota picked up the cheap plastic pen on the desk and signed the divorce papers, signing away the last remaining tether he had to the woman who could have given him the world. High above the chaotic sprawl of the city, in the serene, soundproofed executive penthouse of the Vanguard Tower, Evelyn Sinclair stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the empire she now controlled. She wore a sharply tailored slate-grey designer suit, her chestnut hair falling in perfectly styled waves over her shoulders. The unassuming, penny-pinching housewife was dead and buried. In her place stood a titan. The heavy mahogany doors of her office opened smoothly, and Archibald Reynolds stepped in, carrying a silver tray with a single espresso and a leather-bound briefing folio. "Good morning, Madam Chairman," Archibald said warmly, setting the tray on her expansive glass desk. "The markets have responded incredibly well to your restructuring of Meridian Capital. Stock in the holding company is up 4% since the opening bell." Evelyn turned, offering a small, genuine smile. "Thank you, Archie. And the executive board, have they stopped shaking in their custom Italian loafers yet?" "Not entirely." Archibald chuckled, his eyes twinkling. "Winston Carmichael has been working 18-hour days to ensure every single account is triple audited. He is terrified of displeasing you. Your termination of Mr. Kensington sent a very clear, very chilling message across the entire financial sector. The era of unchecked greed at Meridian is over." Evelyn walked over to her desk, picking up the espresso. "It had to be done. My grandfather built this empire with ruthlessness, but I intend to run it with integrity. If we are managing the wealth of thousands of people, we will do it honestly, or we won't do it at all." She sat down in the high-backed leather chair, projecting an aura of absolute comfort and authority. "What is the status of the legal proceedings?" Archibald opened the folio, adjusting his spectacles. "The federal prosecutors have officially indicted Dakota Kensington on 24 counts of wire fraud, embezzlement, and corporate espionage. He waived his right to a trial. He pled guilty yesterday afternoon." Evelyn's expression remained unreadable, a perfectly smooth mask of professional detachment. "And the sentencing?" The judge was not lenient, especially given the breach of fiduciary duty to his clients, Archibald noted, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. 25 years in a minimum security federal penitentiary, with no chance of parole for the first 15. Furthermore, he is ordered to pay full restitution, though given his frozen assets, he will likely be working in the prison laundry room for pennies an hour for the rest of his natural life. Evelyn looked at the sentencing document. For a fleeting second, she remembered the man she had met 5 years ago, the charming, driven young intern who had made her laugh in a coffee shop. She remembered the nights they spent eating cheap takeout on the floor of a studio apartment, dreaming of the future. But that man was a ghost. The man who had gone to prison was a greedy, cruel stranger who had mistaken her kindness for weakness and her humility for poverty. "And the divorce?" she asked softly. "Finalized this morning," Archibald confirmed. "You are completely free, Evelyn. The ties are officially severed." Evelyn let out a long, slow breath. The invisible weight that had been pressing down on her chest for the last year finally lifted. She wasn't just free of Dakota. She was free of the illusion she had built for herself. She had run away from her grandfather's wealth because she feared it would corrupt her, just as it had corrupted her cousins. She wanted a simple life to prove she was a good person. But looking out over the city, commanding billions of dollars and thousands of employees, Evelyn realized the truth. Money wasn't inherently evil. It was an amplifier. It had amplified Dakota's greed, arrogance, and cruelty. But for her, the wealth would be an amplifier for good. She had the power to reshape industries, to fund philanthropic ventures, to demand accountability from men who thought they were untouchable. She didn't need to hide from her legacy anymore. She needed to wield it. "Thank you, Archibald," Evelyn said, closing the folio. "That concludes that chapter of my life. Indeed, Madam Chairman." Archibald smiled, his posture straightening with pride as he looked at the woman she had become. "If I may say so, your grandfather would be profoundly proud of you. You have more of his iron in your spine than anyone else in the Sinclair bloodline." "I appreciate that, Archie, but I'm not my grandfather," Evelyn replied, standing up and buttoning her suit jacket. Her eyes flashed with a brilliant, unstoppable fire. "I'm going to be better." She picked up her tablet and walked toward the door, her heels clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor. "Now let's get back to work," Evelyn Sinclair commanded, stepping out into the bustling hallway of her empire. "We have a world to run." Far away, in a bleak grey processing room of a federal correctional facility, Dakota Kensington stood shivering in a shapeless, scratchy orange jumpsuit. The heavy steel door of his cell slammed shut behind him, the metallic clang echoing loudly in his ears. He sat down on the thin, lumpy mattress of his cot. On the small metal desk in the corner of the cell, someone had left an old dog-eared copy of a financial magazine. Dakota stared at it, his heart shattering into a million irreparable pieces. Staring back at him from the glossy cover was his ex-wife. Evelyn looked radiant, powerful, and utterly untouchable, wearing the Sinclair Star diamond necklace. The bold golden headline beneath her photograph read, "The New Queen of Wall Street, How Evelyn Sinclair Reclaimed Her Billion-Dollar Throne." Dakota buried his face in his hands, the harsh, fluorescent lights buzzing above him as the crushing, suffocating reality of his new life finally set in. He had chased the illusion of power, stepping on the only person who truly loved him to get there. And in the end, he had lost everything left, with nothing but decades of silence to dwell on the magnificent, unstoppable force he had foolishly called pitiful. The truth always has a way of coming into the light, and karma is rarely as forgiving as a scorned woman with billions in the bank. Evelyn's transformation from a belittled housewife to a commanding titan of industry proves that true value isn't defined by the clothes we wear, but by the power we hold within, and sometimes the power we inherit. If you were captivated by Evelyn's ultimate revenge and want to hear how Dakota reacts when his world crumbles, please hit that like button, share this story with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for the thrilling continuation of this dramatic saga.